When astronauts spend a lot of time in outer space, all sorts of scary-sounding changes happen. Their muscles waste away, their vision gets blurry, and their cancer risk just goes up, just to name a few. Space travel is infamously bad for you. But what if it isn't? At least, not always. It turns out that in some very specific cases, space travel can have some health benefits, and today we're gonna highlight 5 of them. These days, almost half of Americans have high blood pressure, which can lead to a number of dangerous conditions: heart attacks, strokes, kidney disease, and more. But a microgravity environment, like the ones astronauts experience as their spacecraft continually falls around the Earth, naturally lowers heart rate and blood pressure. There's still plenty of gravity in outer space. In fact, the Earth is still pulling on the International Space Station, and all of its inhabitants, at like 90% of what it does to everything on the planet's surface. But the perpetual freefall that comes from the ISS traveling sideways at 8 kilometers a second makes everything feel weightless. And in that weightless environment, the heart slows down because it isn't working against gravity to move all our blood around. Space travel makes the heart's job a lot easier. Blood gets distributed more evenly around the body, and it isn't the only fluid this happens to. It's why you'll often see astronauts develop a puffy face after getting up in orbit. Your typical human body is roughly anywhere from 50 to 60% water by mass. That's a lot of fluid for outer space to redistribute, and some of that redistributed fluid can help reduce the volume of blood inside you. When blood volume drops, so too does the pressure exerted on the walls of your blood vessels. But before anyone thinks about billionaires treating their hypertension by popping up to space, there are some major caveats to this side effect. Because the heart doesn't have to work as hard as it does on Earth, space travel usually leads to atrophy of the heart muscle. Plus, the effects don't last after you come back. Your blood pressure bounces back to whatever your normal is pretty quickly. And finally, there's a reason NASA has requirements for what your blood pressure needs to be to qualify for their astronaut program. Strapping yourself to a rocket and getting launched into space puts a lot of stress on the body, which you probably shouldn't do if you've got high blood pressure or any of the increased risks of stroke and heart attack that come with it. One of the classic side effects of space travel is that microgravity makes your bones weaker. If you're floating around all the time, your skeleton doesn't have to do its job of holding you up. But in the right dose, space radiation could help make your bones stronger. Radiation usually gets a bad rep, because certain forms of it can cause things like cancer, or in sufficient quantities, just plain old death. But some research has shown that low doses of a radiation you get exposed to in space, called ionizing radiation, might actually slow the breakdown of your bones and increase the density of minerals inside them. And if the problem of weak bones with not enough minerals sounds familiar, it might be because it goes by another name here on Earth: osteoporosis. Our bones are constantly getting torn down and rebuilt by cells known as osteoclasts and osteoblasts, respectively. But those osteoblasts get less effective as we age, making fragile bones more of a problem in older adults. Ionizing radiation can give our bones a little boost in 2 separate ways. It can promote the production of osteoblasts while reducing the number of osteoclasts. It's also been shown to reduce inflammation caused by the immune system that can be harmful to bones. In fact, we already use some low-dose radiation therapy here on Earth, because reducing inflammation can also reduce pain, and osteoarthritis can definitely hurt. But this is very much a case of the dose makes the poison. Right now, astronauts get way too much space radiation, and it's not just bad for their bones. But at lower doses, like if we could get the shielding just right on the spacecraft, it might be helpful for keeping bones healthy. And maybe, with further research, we could even unlock a new therapy for people with osteoporosis who are too old to join NASA's next astronaut class. But wait, I'm not done with radiation, because in the right dose, space radiation might help repair your DNA. When our writer brought this up, I thought, how could ionizing radiation possibly be good for our DNA? It is infamous for damaging DNA molecules, hence the increased risk of cancer. Well, it turns out that some scientists have proposed an idea called radiation hormesis. DNA is the code that makes our bodies, except it's written as nucleotides instead of zeros and ones. And over time, errors can and do appear in that code. Some of these errors are typos introduced as the DNA gets replicated, and some are caused by an outside factor, like radiation. But thankfully, your body has a lot of ways to repair these errors in your DNA, such as removing any mutated nucleic acids and swapping in a replacement, or creating a chemical reaction that just undoes the damage. Radiation hormesis proposes that a little radiation could kick those error-correcting processes into gear, which then would encourage cells to repair damage better or faster, or to kill off damaged cells and sweep them up with our immune system's cleanup crew. Just like with our bones, though, the radiation dose makes the poison. Too much radiation won't give the cells a chance to use their DNA repair powers, or just causes way too much damage, killing them before they can make a comeback. And if enough cells die, then the whole human might be toast too. And honestly, scientists aren't in agreement on this particular hypothesis. Part of that is because it's pretty dicey to do experiments that have so much risk to people, and we know irradiating them to find out how much is safe will definitely lead to some pretty bad outcomes, so that would be highly unethical. Meanwhile, researchers have done experiments with cells outside a living human, and while there have been some successes, radiation hormesis still isn't widely accepted in the scientific community, at least in the US. The common wisdom has been all radiation bad for so long, and just like every medical intervention, there's a lot of variation in how things affect individual people. So it'll definitely take time and more incredibly rigorous studies about safety to change how we deal with radiation exposure. We'll get to more benefits of space right after this ad.
This SciShow video is supported by our Presidents of Science. Thank you to TJ Stein, Charlie Stanley, and McLaren Stanley for your continued support of everything we're making here at SciShow. That includes myth-busting popular misconceptions, exploring the unexpected reasons some people end up with certain diseases, putting ourselves in history or space or other times and places we can't travel to. The list of SciShow topics is endless because discovery is infinite. To join our Presidents of Science and keep those discoveries coming to your YouTube subscription feed, you can go to patreon.com/scishow. Thank you for your support.
Before we get to our final benefit, here's a sort of honorable mention. Space travel could maybe, possibly, relieve your back pain, at least until it makes it worse. But it's getting a shout out because the side effects have inspired some cool treatments here on Earth. Some of the worst back pain happens when a nerve gets compressed by the discs between your vertebrae. Our spines are a sort of layer cake, but instead of frosting, we're made of cushiony spinal discs, sandwiched between our bones. Bones also do technically have spongy tissue in them, which really brings the cake analogy together. Since most of us spend our days with our spines roughly vertical, even if we're rocking that remote desk job from our bed, Earth's gravity compresses our spinal cake. But in space's microgravity, your spine stretches out. Astronauts can grow a few inches thanks to this decompression, although, as with the blood pressure, it's only temporary. Now, the process behind this stretching is a bit stranger than the vertebra just floating apart. On Earth, gravity squishes water out of the discs when we're upright during the day. Then at night, laying down to sleep allows them to rehydrate. Space throws off this balance, and the water sticks around, puffing things up and spreading the vertebra out. And if someone has damaged vertebra where they're compressed together, this spreading out could theoretically relieve some of that pressure that causes pain. A bunch of chiropractors and physical therapists actually use a very similar technique here on Earth, known as spinal decompression therapy, to gently help relieve the pressure on a pinched nerve. Unfortunately, spending time on the ISS can cause way more problems for a typical astronaut's back than this possible benefit is worth for them. Full-on microgravity can also stretch out the spine too much, leading to even more back pain once you've been in space for a few days, and a higher risk of problems like sciatica upon return to Earth. Just like going to space to treat your hypertension, it's probably better to stick with the treatments that are literally more down to Earth. So let's end on a more positive note. Last but not least, space travel can be great for your mental health. Sure, there are a hefty number of mental health challenges in space, being confined in a metal tube with deadly conditions outside, getting along with other people in such a small space, being away from your friends and family for an extended period of time, and having a ton of pressure on you to do precise and challenging tasks to perfection. But long term, it's pretty well known that going to space gives you a new and, more often, positive perspective on life. This is known as the overview effect, characterized in research by a sense of wonder and awe and, quote, transcendent experience of seeing all of humanity on our unique little planet. Well, maybe not seeing actual humans. We're a bit too small for that. Psychology studies also show that space leaves a hugely positive impression on astronauts, with a particular emphasis on appreciating the beauty of Earth. Some astronauts even become artists after coming back, finding a way to share the awe they experienced. For example, Apollo 12's Alan Bean, the fourth person to step foot on the moon, took up painting. He once wrote, "It is my dream that on the wings of my paintbrush, many people will see what I saw and feel what I felt walking on another world, some 240,000 miles from my studio here on planet Earth." Meanwhile, research has also shown that after seeing Earth from outer space, astronauts often end up valuing the collective good more. I think we can all agree it'd be great if people cared more about other people and about our planet. So while I'm not telling NASA to lure a bunch of rich and powerful, like Ebenezer Scrooge types onto a rocket in the hopes that they'll have a change of heart, I'm not saying it's a terrible idea. I mean, they're kind of doing it themselves, aren't they? I'd also tell them to maybe start with the ones suffering from high blood pressure, osteoporosis, and back pain. Convince them a trip to space might help with that.